know.
He's a big dip.
So
Itching to make a video about this one. The affidavit released by the Rhode Island Attorney General tonight credits Reddit for this credible and helpful tip. As you may know from our past videos, Reddit's investigative efforts over the years have been controversial, to say the least. On one hand, Reddit communities have solved 3 separate missing person cold cases: Grateful Doe, Woman 82483, and Lyle Stevik. It is not an over-exaggeration to say that without Redditors' sleuthing and social networking, the John and Jane Does in these cases would have never been identified and closure would have never been brought to their families. On the other hand, whenever Reddit users have tried to assist in large-scale manhunts, it has never gone well. At best, wannabe detectives do nothing but engage in pointless speculation and theory crafting, like in the 2021 Gabby Petito case and the 2022 University of Idaho murders. And at worst, they ruin innocent people's lives by hurling baseless accusations at whoever they deem suspicious, like in the Boston Marathon bombings of 2013. In fact, aside from one hit-and-run manslaughter case where Redditors identified the vehicle involved from just a small piece of debris left at the scene, Reddit has never solved a criminal case, until today. On Saturday, December 13th, 2025, the Brown University campus was in the middle of finals week. The temperature had dropped to the mid-30s Fahrenheit. Chilly, but not unusual for a New England December. Inside the Barris and Hawley building, a sprawling complex that houses Brown's engineering and physics departments, students came and went throughout the day. The building's exterior doors were unlocked, as they typically were during daytime hours. Anyone could walk in with no ID or security screening required. But someone had been watching the building for weeks, and it hadn't gone unnoticed. A custodian had noticed an unusual person on campus multiple times over the weeks, much older than a student, but not a professor or staff member. The custodian saw the strange man pacing the hallways in the Barris and Hawley building, looking into classrooms and even ducking behind a bathroom to avoid being seen. But unfortunately, the custodian didn't find it unusual enough to report. Around 2 p.m. on December 13th, students began arriving for the economics review session in room 166, a large 186-seat auditorium-style classroom on the ground floor. The session was optional, led by a 21-year-old teaching assistant who wanted to help students prepare for their upcoming final. Economics 1010, Principles of Economics, one of Brown's most popular courses. At approximately 4:03 p.m., as the review session was winding down, the teaching assistant and several students sitting near the entrance looked up as the door to room 166 opened, expecting another late arrival to the review session, someone rushing in with a last-minute question. But it was not a student. He was stocky, about 5'8", perhaps 200 pounds. He wore all black. Black pants, a black jacket, black shoes, and a black medical face mask that concealed most of his features. On his head, he wore a black knit cap pulled low over his forehead. In his right hand, he carried a small black satchel. In his left, a 9mm handgun. As the gunman entered the room, he raised his weapon and opened fire without hesitation. He moved through the classroom, firing round after round. The students dove under desks, ran for exits. Some were frozen in terror. Others were hit before they could react. 2 students were killed. One of them was not even enrolled in the course. He simply came to help a friend prepare for the exam.
Wow.
9 other students were wounded. The teaching assistant, miraculously, was unharmed. But the psychological damage to everyone in that room would last forever. The entire attack lasted less than 90 seconds. When the gunman's last magazine was empty, he calmly turned and walked out of room 166, exiting through the same door he had entered. He moved through a section of the building with limited surveillance coverage, towards the Hope Street exit.
See,
bro.
Dollar Shave Club just has great razors at a great price and no bull.
Come on, bro. Like, what fucked up shit you got going on in your head for you to, like, want to hurt innocent fucking kids that got nothing to do with your fucked up life?
Of the building with limited surveillance coverage, towards the Hope Street exit. And then, he was gone. Almost as soon as the shots had been fired, students immediately started posting reactions to the shooting on SideChat, an anonymous social media platform for college students, warning others of an active shooter. At 4:22 p.m., 19 minutes after the first shot was fired, Brown's University Public Safety and Emergency Management issued an alert to the campus community. Active shooter near Barris and Hawley Engineering. Run, hide, fight, shelter in place. Providence Police, Rhode Island State Police, FBI agents, and tactical teams descended on Brown's campus within minutes. Helicopters circled overhead. SWAT teams swept through buildings. Officers went door to door, clearing classrooms.
How long they
and
took
dorms,
though to get there?
searching for any sign of the gunman. But the killer had vanished. Inside the Barris and Hawley building, he left behind an unimaginable scene of chaos and carnage. Pools of blood and shell casings littered the floor of room 166. At least 44 rounds of 9mm ammunition had been fired. The students who had survived hid in locked bathrooms and barricaded offices, terrified the shooter would return. Outside, thousands of students were evacuated from campus buildings, many of them taken to the Onley Margolis Athletic Center. They waited for hours, sending desperate messages to friends and family. Some had fled their dorms without shoes, coats, or even phones, leaving their loved ones in the crippling position of not knowing if they were alive or dead. But while students were sheltering in terror, investigators were facing their own nightmare. They had almost nothing to go on. The students confirmed that the shooter had been wearing a mask and a hat to conceal any identifying features. When authorities checked the cameras, they discovered he had moved through parts of the building with limited camera coverage. Brown University had over 1,200 security cameras installed across campus, yet not a single one of them had captured a clear image of the gunman's face.
Not one?
The cameras did, however, show the chaos after the shooting. The students running, the police response, and the frantic evacuation. But they didn't show the shooter entering the building or leaving. The only footage they had was grainy, distant, and frustratingly unclear.
Why the fuck
The
they got
campus remained on
trash-ass
lockdown throughout
cameras?
the night.
For
Students on campus were too afraid to
like for a school that gets so much money through like college, tuitions and shit like that. What the fuck? Like you would think they have like 4K cameras knowing goofy shit like this happens all the time, bro. Like they need to like lock in, man. Have some like cops on every university, like at least 2 cops per school or 3. I don't know if they could afford it, but per school, like university or elementary, whatever the case may be. Daycares,
sleep, and a bride and groom at a nearby wedding venue
churches.
were forced to shelter in place during what should have been the happiest day of their lives. The entire East Side neighborhood was paralyzed with fear of a potential round 2. Investigators worked through the night, reviewing every second of surveillance footage they could find. They canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking residents if they had seen anything suspicious. They collected witness statements from students who had been in the building. They processed the crime scene, collecting the shell casings, examining ballistic evidence, searching for any clue that might lead them to the killer. None of it helped. The shooter had been meticulous. He left no identification or personal items behind, just 44 spent shell casings in a classroom of victims. By Sunday morning, the reality was clear. Whoever did this had planned it carefully, and he was still out there, possibly planning his next attack. At approximately 3:45 a.m. on Sunday, December 14th, less than 12 hours after the shooting, Providence police received a tip. Investigators descended on a Hampton Inn in Coventry, Rhode Island, about 20 miles from Providence, detaining a man they described as a person of interest. Providence Police Chief Oscar Perez announced that they were no longer looking for anyone else in connection with the shooting. Within 2 hours, Brown University finally lifted the shelter-in-place order, allowing those on campus to finally breathe. For a few hours, it seemed like the case might be solved. But by late Sunday night, the hope evaporated. The man detained at the Hampton Inn was released without charges. They got the wrong guy. Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Nerona held a press conference admitting that, while some evidence had pointed to the initial person of interest, the investigation now points in a different direction. Chief Perez defended the detention, saying it was not a mistake, but just how investigations work. That wasn't how everybody felt. Multiple law enforcement sources told reporters that, actually, it was a mistake. They claimed that the investigation had to effectively restart after early missteps, and that the process had been set back by several hours. Every hour in an investigation like this is precious. Hours when the real shooter was getting further away, covering his tracks, possibly even fleeing the state. To the terrified public, it signaled the most worrying sign of all. Law enforcement had no idea who they were looking for. By the next day, investigators were back to square one. They released new images and video of a person of interest, a stocky man in dark clothing and a face mask, walking through Providence's streets, exactly the same as the description given to them by the students. But the footage was blurry, distant, and maddeningly vague. The man's face was completely obscured. His features were indistinguishable. The FBI announced a reward of up to $50,000 for information leading to the identification, arrest, and conviction of the shooter. They pleaded with the public for help. "We're looking for a moment that is shorter than someone taking a breath," Chief Perez said, urging anyone with camera footage from the area to come forward. The investigators were soon flooded with tips from people who thought they recognized the man in the video, but the tips that came in were largely unhelpful. Others reported seeing suspicious people near campus, but none of those leads panned out either. At approximately 8:30 p.m. on Monday, December 15th, 2 days after the shooting, the situation escalated. In Brookline, Massachusetts, a quiet suburb just outside Boston, about 50 miles from Providence, police got an unexpected call. Shots had been fired on Gibbs Street, in a residential building near Boston University. When officers arrived, they found 47-year-old Nuno F.G. Loureiro lying in the foyer of his apartment building, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds.
Go all in on love this Valentine's with premium.
Come on, bro.
Rushed lying in the foyer of his apartment building, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. Paramedics rushed him to Beth Israel Hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery, but it was too late to save him. Loureiro was pronounced dead early Tuesday morning, December 16th. Investigators working the Brown shooting case couldn't shake the question, were these cases related, or just two tragic coincidences? Nuno Loureiro was an acclaimed physicist, a professor of nuclear science and engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the director of MIT's Plasma Science and Fusion Center. He was a graduate of the Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon, Portugal, an incredible, accomplished scientist, not a student like the killings at Brown University. The FBI publicly stated that there was no known connection between the Brown shooting and the MIT professor's murder. It was just a terrible coincidence. Two horrific crimes in the same region within 48 hours. But that wasn't the whole truth. Behind the scenes, investigators were starting to notice troubling similarities between the cases. Both shootings were execution style. The victims of both shootings were connected to academia, and both crimes had been carried out with a high level of precision, with no obvious evidence left behind to track the killer. However, without concrete evidence linking the two cases, law enforcement treated them as separate investigations. The Brookline police launched a homicide inquiry into the murder of Loureiro, but they publicly maintained that the cases were unrelated. None of this settled the anxiety, especially for investigators. A college campus shooter was still at large, and a renowned MIT professor had been murdered, and law enforcement seemed no closer to solving either case. But that's because they simply hadn't been looking in the right place. On the same night Nuno Loureiro was murdered, an anonymous Reddit user logged onto the r/Providence subreddit and posted a comment in a thread about the Brown shooting. "I'm being dead serious. The police need to look into the gray Nissan with Florida plates, possibly a rental. That was the car he was driving." Under normal circumstances, a post like this might have been ignored. Reddit is full of amateur sleuths and armchair detectives, especially during high-profile crimes. We've even covered a few of them on this channel. After the disastrous false accusations during the Boston Marathon bombing investigation in 2013, when Reddit users wrongly identified an innocent student as a suspect, the platform had become increasingly cautious about vigilante justice. But this one felt different. It wasn't vague or speculative. The Redditor wasn't even suggesting specific people. He didn't say, "I think," or "maybe." He said, "Police need to look into this." Other Reddit users urged the Redditor to report the information to the FBI. One user wrote, "If you really saw this, you need to call the tip line, now." The Redditor replied, "I already did." By this point, investigators had received hundreds of tips, nearly 200 of them considered actionable. The Redditor's tip was just one of many, and as a result, it was lost in a pile of maybes. But the next day, someone at the Providence Police Department saw the Redditor's comment. One detail immediately caught their attention: a gray Nissan with Florida plates, possibly a rental. Up until that moment, investigators had not connected any vehicle to the shooter. They had surveillance footage of a masked man walking through Providence's streets, but they didn't know how he arrived or how he left. And if he had driven a car, they certainly didn't know what kind it was. The Redditor's tip may have done exactly what the authorities were struggling to do: identify a tangible piece of evidence that they could actually trace. If it was legitimate, that is. Investigators began combing through their surveillance footage, this time specifically looking for a gray Nissan sedan. They found one, captured on multiple cameras throughout the day on December 13th, moving through the streets near Brown's campus. The next step was to identify the license plate and track exactly where this person of interest had been in the days leading up to the attack. Providence police had access to a network of more than 70 automated license plate readers operated around the city by a surveillance company called Flock Safety. These solar-powered cameras mounted on poles throughout the city capture images and data from passing vehicles, including license plates. They're controversial due to privacy concerns, but in this case, they were useful. Using Flock's database, investigators found multiple hits on a gray Nissan Sentra sedan with license plate 62DQEV from Florida, just like the Redditor had claimed, in the area around Brown's campus on and leading up to December 13th. Flock's cameras captured the Nissan 14 different times in the Providence area on December 1st, 12th, and again on the 13th, the day of the attack. Most telling of all, that day, the vehicle had been circling the neighborhood for hours before the shooting took place. With the license plate in hand, investigators traced the vehicle to the rental car company, Alamo Rent-A-Car in downtown Boston. The car had been rented out on December 1st, nearly 2 weeks before the shooting. Detectives obtained security footage from the Alamo facility, and there, finally, they had what they desperately needed, a clear image of the renter's face. His name was on the rental agreement, Claudio Manuel Neves Valente, a 48-year-old Portuguese national. But before investigators could move forward, they needed to talk to the Redditor who had led them to this suspect in the first place. The problem was, they still had no idea who he was. They knew he had posted on Reddit and that he had called the FBI tip line, but they didn't have his name, his address, or his contact information. However, their investigation did lead them to a second person of interest who would break open the entire case. Investigators released security footage, capturing this individual having some kind of confrontation with the prime suspect near the corner of Cook and Benevolent Streets, just 2 hours before the attack. They desperately wanted to speak to this individual. That man, it turns out, was a homeless man and former Brown student who now often sleeps in the basement of the Barris and Holly building. On Wednesday, December 17th, after seeing himself in the surveillance footage, the homeless student approached Providence police officers near Brown's University Alumni Hall. He told them he wanted to talk. He had information about the shooter. Officers immediately brought him to the police station for an interview, and were surprised to discover that this homeless former student was also the Redditor who had drawn attention to the gray Nissan. Investigators had since referred to this man as John, so we'll do the same. What John told them was extraordinary. According to the affidavit, John's encounter with the shooter began at approximately 1:45 p.m. on Saturday, December 13th, more than 2 hours before the attack. John had been inside the Barris and Holly building, using a ground floor restroom across from the auditorium where the shooting would later occur. While in the restroom, John noticed another man inside, wearing a surgical mask and dark clothing. John made eye contact with him, and immediately, something felt wrong. His clothing was inappropriate and inadequate for the weather, John told investigators. It was December in New England. The temperature was in the 30s, yet this man was dressed as if he were trying to hide, not stay warm. John left the restroom, and soon after, so did the masked man. And then, as John later described it, a game of cat and mouse began.
Grip, stability, precision.
What does that mean, a game of cat and mouse? Just chasing them around and shit. That's it. My dumb ass took me a little minute to understand that. Trying to catch it right on time so I could catch everything.
John followed the man outside, keeping his distance, watching him move through the residential streets around Brown's campus. The man walked to a gray Nissan sedan with Florida plates, parked behind the Rhode Island Historical Society, just 3 blocks from the Barris and Holly building. The man approached the car, unlocked it, looked inside, then locked it again, and walked away. John.
Wow. I ain't gonna lie, this dude John, I know this is just his John Doe name, whatever, but he's an angel. That's crazy. That's crazy. Like, what would make him follow this nigga? A homeless dude just following a random dude. And you ended up just posting on Reddit. They need to, like, take John off the streets and give him a job, help him out and shit like that.
And thought this was strange. Why would someone unlock their car, not get in or grab anything from it, then lock it again and keep walking? When John approached the car and peeked in the window, he noticed 2 funny-style bags on the rear floorboard on the passenger side. The man circled...
This is the only time it's cool to be a Karen, I guess. This is the only time. Because, like, bro, like, look at this man really... He really helped break a case for real. Unfortunately, he couldn't, like, prevent it, but he's helping find the guy and shit.
The block. John kept following. Every time they made eye contact, the man changed direction, as if trying to lose or evade him. It all made John more suspicious. At one point, John called out to him, "Your car is back there. Why are you circling the block?" The man turned around. He stared at John, and then he responded, "I don't know you from nobody." Then repeatedly asked, "Why are you harassing me?" John decided to back off. He watched the man approach the Nissan one more time, then walk away again. John stopped following him after that. A little over 2 hours later, the shooting occurred. When John saw the surveillance images released by police, he immediately recognized the man. He went straight to Reddit and called the FBI tip line. During the police interview, detectives showed John 2 surveillance images of the suspect's vehicle. John exclaimed, "Holy shit, that could be it." They showed him footage from the Alamo rental car facility, including images of the man who rented the car. John recognized him as the same man he had encountered in the bathroom. Attorney General Peter Nerona would later say, "He blew this case right open. When you crack it, you crack it." With John's testimony and the rental car records in hand, investigators now had a name to chase, Claudio Manuel Neves Valente.
Why?
They ran his background, but what they found was both unexpected and deeply troubling. Neves Valente had a direct connection to Brown University. He had been enrolled as a graduate student in the physics PhD program from the fall of 2000 to the spring of 2001. He had taken a leave of absence in April 2001 and formally withdrew in July 2003, never completing his degree. He had no active affiliation with Brown for more than 2 decades. But there was more. Neves Valente had also attended the Instituto Superior decades, but
2
completing his
decades?
degree. He had no active affiliation with Brown for more than 2 decades. But there was more.
So what the
Neves
fuck?
Valente had also attended the Instituto Superior Técnico in Lisbon, Portugal, between 1995 and 2000, studying for a degree in engineering physics. He graduated with a remarkable average score of 19 out of 20, an extraordinary achievement at one of Portugal's most demanding universities. That means he was at the university at the same time as Nuno Loureiro, the MIT professor who was murdered. Investigators had just stumbled onto the connection that linked the Brown shooting to the MIT professor's murder. They were classmates. They knew each other. Former classmates told investigators that Neves Valente had been brilliant but difficult. He frequently got into conflicts with fellow students, believing they were all incompetent compared to him. After leaving Brown, Neves Valente's academic career collapsed. A 1998 announcement in Portugal's official Diário da República referred to Neves Valente's appointment as a teaching assistant at IST, but then a 2000 notice mentioned his termination from the role. Reporters later indicated that he had been dismissed from the position for unknown reasons. In 2017, Neves Valente won a U.S. green card through the Diversity Visa Lottery program, becoming a lawful permanent resident. He returned to the United States, and then, for
This
reasons...
nigga wasn't even a citizen and did this fucking massacre? Bro, why? What the fuck?
Still unknown, he severed ties with his family in Portugal. 8 years later, in November 2025, Neves Valente was preparing for his attack. He rented a storage unit in Salem, New Hampshire on November 25th. He rented a hotel room in Boston on November 29th and 30th. And on December 1st, he rented a gray Nissan Sentra with Florida plates from Alamo in downtown Boston. For nearly 2 weeks, he circled Brown's campus, watching, planning, preparing. Security camera footage captured him on campus as early as November 28th. On December 13th, he walked into room 166 and opened fire. After fleeing Rhode Island, Neves Valente drove to Brookline 160 on campus as early as November 28th. On December 13th, he walked into room 166 and opened fire.
It took him a few
After
days
fleeing
to do
Rhode
that
Island,
crazy
Neves
shit.
Valente drove to Brookline, Massachusetts. Security footage captured him within a half-mile of MIT professor Nuno Loureiro's home and entering an apartment building in the vicinity on December 15th around 8:30 p.m., the night Loureiro was fatally shot. About an hour later, he was seen entering the Salem, New Hampshire storage facility where he had rented a unit. Now, on Thursday, December 18th, 5 days after the Brown shooting, investigators had identified their suspect. They had his name, his photo, and clear connections tying him to both murders. They had traced his movements through surveillance footage and license plate readers, but Neves Valente had been meticulous. After fleeing Rhode Island, he had swapped the Florida license plate on his rental car for Maine plates, attempting to evade detection. At approximately 9 p.m. on Thursday, December 18th, FBI SWAT teams executed court-authorized search warrants at the Salem storage facility. They found Neves Valente's body inside an empty unit next to the one he had rented. An autopsy conducted by the New Hampshire Medical Examiner's Office determined that Neves Valente had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound on Tuesday, December 16th, the same day Nuno Loureiro succumbed to his injuries at the hospital.
Appreciate the
By
follow.
the time
Appreciate the
investigators
follow.
found the shooter, he had been dead for 2 days. Investigators also found his satchel, containing 2 firearms and an electronic device containing 4 short video recordings. At a late-night press conference on Thursday, December 18th, Rhode Island Attorney General Peter Nerona
This fucking sicko didn't even get prosecuted or nothing. He took his life and shit. That's crazy as fuck.
And U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts Lee Foley announced their findings. The Connecticut State Police Forensic Science Laboratory had confirmed through DNA analysis and ballistics testing that one of the guns was involved in the mass shooting at Brown University, while the other was connected to Larero's death. The shell casings from the two crime scenes did not match, confirming that two different weapons were used.
Cost of power is getting higher and higher and higher. Something's bound to break.
Earlier in the morning. That's crazy. That's funny as fuck. But yeah, it's because it's going viral right now. I had to click on it. I was like, something just like caught my eye. I was like, bro, I gotta watch this because I heard about it, but I never know like what had happened with the case and all that.
Preliminary DNA test established a match between Neves Valente and DNA obtained from evidence at Brown University. They confirmed he acted alone, but acknowledged that many questions remain unanswered. Why did he target Brown? Why that particular classroom? Why Nuno Larero? And what was his motive? The manhunt was over, but the mystery of why it happened was far from solved. Over the holidays, as Brown students scattered to their homes off campus, FBI agents spent their days analyzing the electronic device found with Neves Valente's body. They contained 4 short videos that Neves Valente had recorded in the storage unit after the murders. In the recordings, he confessed to the murders, though made no specific comment on the murder of the professor. He explained that he had been planning the Brown University shooting for a long time, at least 6 semesters, he said, and he made clear that Brown University was his intended target, but he refused to explain why. In fact, Neves Valente showed no remorse and no interest in explaining any of his actions, other than to say, "I'm not going to apologize, because during my lifetime, no one sincerely apologized to me." The FBI has since released the video transcripts, but their contents remain open to interpretation. He acknowledged that the killings were, quote, incompetent, and claimed that they were triggered by John's confrontation and that he had no real ideology. He said his only objective was to leave more or less on his own terms and to ensure that he wouldn't be the one who ended up suffering the most from all this. But he never mentioned his former classmate Larero. Law enforcement sources have told ABC News that Neves Valente described having 20-year grudges that propelled him to buy guns and carry out shootings, but these aren't mentioned in the videos. But even with the
20-year grudges is insane, bro. Wow.
Investigators still don't have a clear motive. Why did he target Brown after more than 2 decades away from the university? Why did he shoot students who had no connection to him? Why Nuno Larero, a former classmate who had become a successful physicist? Some believe the answer lies in that last question.
Jealousy?
Neves Valente was clearly a genius in his classes, yet he had failed to achieve lasting professional success. Larero, on the other hand, went from success to success. The most popular theory is that Larero represented something that Neves Valente could never achieve.
That's crazy.
But law enforcement officials emphasized that Larero had no recent contact with Neves Valente and described the attack as a deliberate, unilateral act of criminal violence carried out against a victim unconnected to his personal or professional failures. But when Nuno Larero's death was publicly linked to Neves Valente, a conspiracy narrative quickly emerged, one you've probably encountered if you followed the story on forums and social media. Within hours of Larero's death, some outlets and social media users began speculating that his murder was connected to Iran, geopolitical tensions, or an alleged targeting of pro-Israel academics. Others baselessly claimed that Larero was pro-Israel and that he was targeted for that reason. And some speculated that Larero's murder was connected to corporate interests in the fusion energy field, or that powerful monopolies were involved. While of course none of the speculation narratives are impossible, there is, at this time, zero evidence for any of this. Nuno Larero never made any public stances on politics, and it is unlikely that there is some shadowy conspiracy targeting MIT nuclear professors. Neves Valente was a software developer with, according to police, some grudges that ate at him. This was most likely the act of a deeply troubled individual who harbored resentment about his own academic and professional failures, fixated on people he felt represented the success he never achieved, and planned violence over decades before finally acting. Neves Valente himself said he had no ideological motive. In the aftermath of the investigation, Providence Mayor Brett Smiley wrote to FBI Director Kash Patel requesting that John receive the full $50,000 reward offered for information leading to the suspect's identification and arrest.
That's a nice
Fellow Reddit
reward.
users on the r/Providence subreddit had already flooded the forum with praise for Reddit Guy, but John has remained anonymous and has declined all requests from the media. On Wednesday evening, he posted on
That's
Reddit
smart.
one final time. Respectfully, I have said all I have to say on the matter to the right people. He never revealed his real name. As of this
That's
video,
fire.
he has given no interviews. He simply did what he thought was right, and then disappeared back into anonymity.
That's
As of
an
early
angel,
January
bro.
2026, the FBI has not confirmed whether John will receive the reward. The Bureau maintains a long-standing policy not to comment on whether reward money has been paid and to whom, citing privacy protection and the need to ensure public cooperation with future investigations. On January 5th, 2026, Rhode Island Hospital announced that all 9 victims who were treated for gunshot wounds had been discharged. The last victim was released in stable condition after spending more than 3 weeks in the hospital. All are expected to survive. As of recording this video, there's no more insight into why this killer decided to pull off such horrific and seemingly random acts of violence. And, given the content of his videos, there's no reason to believe we'll find out anytime soon. But the Brown University shooting represents one of the most unusual criminal investigations
shit
in
was
recent
so
American history.
random,
What is
bro.
clear is this. In an era of high-tech surveillance, facial recognition software, and billion-dollar law enforcement budgets, it was an ordinary person with sharp eyes, keen intuition, and a Reddit account who solved the case. Law
Right.
enforcement had every tool imaginable at its disposal. Brown University had 1,200 security cameras.
1,200?
Providence Police had access to 70 automated license plate readers. The FBI brought federal resources, facial recognition technology, and a
They could
nationwide
not
network of
catch him.
field offices. There was a $50,000 reward. There were
Until
hundreds of tips. There were thousands of hours of
John Doe
surveillance
saved him
footage, an incredible
with the
amount of
case.
resources.
Wow.
And yet, for 5 days, they couldn't identify the shooter. The case was solved only because a man, without a home, posted on Reddit. John, whoever he
Wow.
is, had something that cameras and algorithms can never replicate: human intuition. He saw a man in a bathroom and immediately felt something was wrong. He followed that instinct, observed the guy in action, and remembered all the details. And when he saw surveillance images released by police, he connected the dots and became a hero.
Wow.
As you may have noticed at the beginning of this video, this story
That's
was first
crazy.
brought to our attention by one of our awesome fans. If there's a story or a topic that you want us to make a video
That's crazy. That's unbelievable. That boy John is a miracle, man. He couldn't prevent it, but at least he was able to get that man caught, man. I mean, he was dead by the time they caught him. Try to catch him. Man. That's a sick world we live in, man. It's so sad, bro. What the comments say? I've read their cause school shooters. Waiting 19 minutes after the first shot is a long time to pass before announcing that there's an active shooter. I mean, come on. 19 minutes afterwards, because they trying to, nobody, for me, you can't make an announcement if nobody, you feel me? It's sure, but it's still crazy, though. Nobody's ever ready for shit like that, bro. Please don't assume all of you on campus are suspicious until someone else has to shine the better our career option while going to school outside of 5 minutes. True. You can't make this up. This shit's crazy. That was a crazy story, man. I ain't gonna lie. Let's see. I might wrap that up, though. I ain't gonna lie. I'll probably be back on later. Yeah, I'm gonna wrap that up. Watch, y'all. Safety. Have a good day. Enjoy your day, and, keep God in your life, man.